Welcome to another fantastic episode of the Built for Growth podcast. Today I had Karen Kerrigan on the podcast. She is the CEO and president of SBE Council, Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council. And for over 30 years, she has been advocating for small business rights. She regularly goes and speaks out about everything from top to bottom, which we cover in this episode. We talk about so many interesting things and the low-hanging fruit for small businesses, how AI is impacting small businesses, and free resources, things that I didn't know. And I didn't actually bring it up in the podcast, but I'm going to start my own homeschool, and I found this really, really helpful. And there's also some staggering statistics that I also thought was very interesting about the economy and about small businesses themselves. So I think there's a ton to learn and unpack, but mostly in this episode, I hope that you leave inspired. If you are wondering if it is a good time to start a small business, well, Karen says yes, and she's going to provide a lot of the insights and the know-how on the economy and small business itself and what you can do to get started. Thanks for listening. This episode is brought to you by Timeline. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. Karen, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today because I personally am a huge advocate for small business. I love the cultural dynamic that it brings to have individuality in our economy, and I love it. I appreciate it. I travel a lot. I always look for mom and pop places to eat. I try to find any small business, anything that's not a chain. I'm there for it. I go to farmers markets. I get most of what I need from small business. I do shop on Amazon. I'm guilty of that, but I'm trying to wean myself more and more and just support. I'm one of those people that is willing to spend more money because I know that this is going to buy a family a bike for their kid for Christmas. Instead of, a Ferrari, another Ferrari for these multi-million billionaires that are, with these large chains. And I just feel so much better when my money goes to that. But I don't necessarily think I'm in the majority. And I think what I'm gathering is that small businesses are struggling right now. It is really hard. And I don't know if that's more due to the overhead expense. I think when you have to buy smaller quantities, it costs more. The marketing is more expensive. It just seems like there's a lot of challenge. And my sister, who is about 15 years younger than I am, an entirely different generation, she is struggling to find a job right now, although I feel like she's well qualified. But, these things are going hand in hand where it just seems like at least my small network of people who are trying to start small businesses. I have a friend of mine in Australia. His name's Dylan. He has this doggy daycare, and he's always like, do you have any ideas of how I can get more word? And I'm like, just, you got to find ways of word of mouth, I think, when you're a small business. I mean, I'm like, tell your current customers to bring a friend for a day. And then, hopefully that becomes a client. But it seems like it's tough. Am I right? Is it tough to be a small business right now?
It is. It's never been easy. Let me put it that way, right? And since I've been doing this now for over 30 years, representing small businesses and being an advocate for them, not only in Washington, but around the world, we've gone through periods, disruptive periods like this, where it's tougher. And then we have incredible transformative periods of growth. But the good news is small businesses have always been resilient during this time. And there are a lot of great tools that they have right now, digital tools in terms of marketing and lower ad costs and reaching new consumers and new markets. But I do have to say that, the last 5 or 6 years have been really tough, right? After the COVID shutdown, that was really tough. There were supply chain challenges, multi-years of cumulative inflationary pressures that really have not subsided yet. The high costs of doing business. But I think we're going to be going into a good period. Now, I have to say, Miesha, that even despite these challenges, the number of people who have filed business applications over the past 3 to 4 years has been off the charts. It's over 5 million. We've never seen this level of people filing business applications in the U.S. Now, not all those people go and launch businesses, but the interest is there. They have the digital tools, the barriers to entry are a lot lower. But they do need more customers like you, Miesha, who are intentional, about shopping small and supporting small businesses. And even on Amazon, I would say stick there because they have hundreds of thousands of small sellers on the Amazon site, and you can find them,
They
if you
do, but
want to.
Amazon takes like 50% of what they sell, and it makes me mad.
Well, it's interesting. We've done some studies on that. And if you look at, you look at a retailer, you look at, a person who sells on Amazon, and when you look at the costs, if you didn't sell on Amazon, you just had a retail shop, right? And in terms of all the overhead costs, I mean, many of the sellers that we survey said, my costs are actually about the same or lower, than my other channel, which may be a retail store, a shop, or some other type of channel that they use. So there are services that they provide that are very valuable that are not seen. But the point is, Miesha, I think you're right. It's really it's costly. It's very costly, and that's why we're working every day here in Washington and across the U.S. and even the world to say, look at government has to be really, really careful about the costs that it imposes on small businesses in terms of regulations, in terms of taxes, monetary policy that drives inflationary costs higher, and that they've always got to look at the unintended consequences of what they do because every industry is
Mhm.
dominated by small businesses, and if you want a competitive economy, if you want local job creation, you have to support small businesses because if small business crashes, our economy crashes.
Do you think that the big conglomerates want to snuff out small business? Because I don't know why, call me a conspiracy theorist, but it felt that way with COVID. It felt that way. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe just everybody really, in the higher ups had these, these great intentions. But, it was frustrating to me when, for example, in Las Vegas, you can see things like the casinos stay open, right? But, little Joe over here couldn't have, his little place or his little business or his little, restaurant. And people built like all these outdoor seating for restaurants, right? Small businesses spent like so much money and then they would change it. And it was like, is this on purpose? I don't, I mean, I guess my question here is like, is there pressure or idealism for certain businesses to not have the competition of small business, to like really snuff it out so that it's just a few keychains and that's pretty much what we have to deal with?
Well, I would say that every business, whether they're large, medium, or small, particularly, those who are large, are very, very competitive, right? And they look for opportunities to build market share. And no doubt that I've seen instances over the past 30 years where you've had some big companies that were pushing regulations or policies that
Mhm.
were sort of protectionist in nature, right? That would give them an advantage in the marketplace. But we called them out, all the time. So and that's why it's important that, when we do like a competition policy and policies across the board, that they're not disproportionately negatively impacting any industry or any business. Now, in the case of COVID, I just think there were, our policymakers, legislators, lawmakers, governors, whatever, they just did a lot of things that didn't make sense, right? I mean, it was just, and we continually called them out on that. Said, why this and not that? And I just think that was a very dysfunctional period. And we're all looking back at that now and scratching our heads and saying, why? Um, but yeah, a lot did not make sense during that time where the little store got shut down, but maybe the big Walmart, because, it happened to be a grocery store and other things got to stay open. And but again, from a policy perspective, there's no doubt that there are industries or certain companies that try to do things to give them a competitive disadvantage in the policy world. But we're always saying, look at policy has to be neutral. And if we're going to have growth, economic growth, vibrancy, innovation, and investment, and not a stagnant economy, if you want people to start businesses, then you do have to have neutral policy, and it's got to treat all businesses the same, and it can't be favorite. You can't have favorite industries or favorite businesses.
Right.
So, but yeah, there's been plenty of examples, Miesha, in the past that we could point to where this has happened. And again, that's, and history does repeat itself, and we just got to continue to call that out.
So, so tell me a little bit more about SBE, the Small Business and Entrepreneur Council. Where does the funding come from from it? Why did you decide to take this on? I know you've been a huge advocate for 30 plus years, but I imagine you probably could have gone any one direction. I mean, is this something that's near and dear to your heart? Why do you do this?
Well, look, I'm honored to do what I do, each and every day. I love small business and entrepreneurs. I love, economic freedom. I love the fact that people can, pursue their American dream through business ownership. And um, I just remember growing up. I mean, whether it was in Queens or St. Louis or eventually upstate New York in a small town, I mean, really, it was the small businesses. I mean, you knew who these people were. They supported our community. They were our best friends. They supported all the sports, activities in the schools. And look, I thought for a while I was going to be, when I went to college, I had did my college internship on Capitol Hill, that I was going to go into foreign affairs and be this great, ambassador or something like that. Now I get to be an ambassador for small business across the world. But, really where I landed is where, you know, um, business and economic policy come together. And I've always been small business has always been appealed to me. I have a lot of great friends who are small business owners, and there's the little guy. And I just, maybe it's coming from a very modest family and, a small town where, you saw the little guy struggling, where that love came from. But the whole 30 years has been exciting. Like I said, there, there's been periods of disruption. We were pre-internet, Miesha. We came along before the internet. Could you imagine, when the internet came around and policymakers like, oh, no, no, we got to highly regulate the internet because it will shut down all the small businesses. And we're like, wait, 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 this could be a great tool. So we've gone through all these disruptive periods: internet, the financial crisis, the app economy, COVID, digitization, now AI, right? Artificial intelligence, and how that's affecting small businesses and the economy. And there's always opportunity. There is, even in the toughest times, there's opportunities for entrepreneurs. And that's where you've seen during the recession, the financial crisis, some of the greatest American brands have been started, during those periods, during those tough periods where there was opportunity. At SBE Council, we have over 100,000 members throughout the country. We are, supported by these individual small business members, supported by some state and local business organization, independent groups who want a voice in Washington. We work with our friends in the corporate community, where if we do projects or events or um, uh, maybe studies and things like that, to support our efforts. So we get a broad base of support, but mostly from small business owners. And they're our voice in Washington. They're very active. They run our organization, and they're the voice that matters, from my perspective, up on Capitol Hill, when legislators, or when we go to the White House or to a regulatory agency, when they hear from real small business owners, that's when we have the most impact. And so that's why I love what I do. I mean, in order to see like a small business owner from Ohio come to Washington and have immediate impact, on the debate or the direction of a certain policy, is really exciting. Or to see two of our members come up with the idea to make investment and debt-based crowdfunding online. They came up with a framework for that, and we took that idea, to Washington, and that happened. And that's been transformative for millions of small businesses who are able to do investment crowdfunding online. So our best ideas come from small businesses, and that's why I love because we're like a change maker in terms of what we do. So, and it never gets boring. Let me tell you that. Never, never gets boring.
Um, Okay, so I don't want to get too political, but I do want to understand the tariffs a little bit because I want to understand how that's impacting our small business and economy. I think that Trump, is trying to sometimes use it as a power move to, get more compliance and overall, get something good out of that. But I don't fully understand it, and not and as myself, not really being someone who has put my resources into selling something from a small
Right?
business, right? I don't fully understand how this impacts, the trade and the economy and the expense of bringing materials in, and maybe even inside the U.S. that there's some impact. I do hear that from some of my small business friends that has been a challenge. Um, how has that impacted small business, and is it for the better or for the worse?
Well, I would say right now it's just causing uncertainty, right? And for some businesses in some sectors, I would say construction, restaurant, certain industries, it's just a little bit more acute and painful, right? So, we came at a survey of ours at the beginning of August. We asked them what was the impact of tariffs on their, were they concerned about it? 73% said yes. They were concerned about the impact of tariffs. And we asked how they were impacting their business. Uh, 5% said significantly, 40 something percent said somewhat, but not significantly. It's having some impact. And then, like, there was 35% said it was no impact at all. I think where we are on that is it's a very interesting question. I think it's causing uncertainty because business owners, I think the broader business community wants to know where this whole issue of tariffs lands, right? Is
Yes.
it is it going to be a straightforward policy of reciprocity? If you tariff us, we'll tariff you. If you do no tariffs on us, we'll do no tariffs on you. I think that's what most business owners thought this reciprocal trade policy was going to be about, rather than being a, a form of punishment or threatening, saying, oh,
Right.
50% tariffs if you do that. So that is causing disruption and some uncertainty. And as I said, particularly, for some industries. And certainly, and for retailers too. I have to say, for retailers that import, a lot of things, or other businesses that import, that import certain inputs, for their business, and there's a lot of them. It's been challenging. But I think what's happened now, Amisha, and because we obviously policy is what we do, businesses are weighing this against, okay, now we're getting some regulatory certainty from the Trump administration. They're pulling back on, some of the overreach of the Biden administration. There's some certainty on some labor issues. There's some certainty on some energy issues and access to capital issues and this issue. So that is very helpful for businesses in driving confidence and lowering their costs. And the other big issue that has been very helpful is the tax policy in the One Big Beautiful Bill, because there were a number of tax increases that were set to take place at the end of this year if they were not extended. The 20% small business deduction being one of them. Now that's been made permanent. So small businesses have this permanent deduction for the business. There was also expensing provisions that were set to expire, where you expense, all of your investments. The research and development tax credit has been made permanent. So all these permanency of these tax provisions, the lower individual rates, that has been very positive for small businesses. So you can see where there's sort of this balancing effect that the
Right.
tariffs had against these other policies. So that's why there's not a total freak out right
Okay.
now, is the best way that I can put it in the small business community. Um, but on the other hand, you know, um, what do they depend on? They depend on consumers and people buying goods. And, the individual consumer is feeling the pinch of these tariffs. And so there is some cutting back, there is a slowdown in consumer demand. And, that is causing some uncertainty as well. So right now we're in a transition period. I just think sooner rather than later, and this is the position that we've been stating to the White House, and we get the reciprocal tariff policy position, you know what I mean? But I said, well, let's just stick with it and go, rather than saying tomorrow we're going to do this. I think if we land, on that pure reciprocal policy and figure out some of these trade agreements, we're going to have the type of certainty and the stability that small businesses need.
Okay. That's helpful. That makes a lot of sense that there's some balancing acts in all of this and effort. But there's on the federal level, and then there's also a state level, right? Because it seems like per state it can be so different. And then I'm not even going to get into other countries and things like that. But yeah, I think California seems to be like one of the most challenging places to have a small business. Am I correct? And
100%, yes. Yes, when you look at the states that are the toughest, I mean, California, Illinois, New York, it's all the likely suspects that top the list. The regulatory and tax burden is just horrific, and they are driving businesses out of the state. They're going to zero tax, low tax states, Texas, Nevada, Tennessee, Florida. I mean, the migration is extraordinary in terms of the people and the businesses from those states. So you're absolutely correct.
yeah, we've had a major influx in Nevada with the Californians coming here. We're like, what? No state income tax? I'm out. I was like, oh man, the traffic. But no wonder. I mean, honestly, I think if I lived in one of those places and I was trying to do something, a small business as well, I would probably seek to move somewhere that would support what I'm doing as well.
Well, exactly. And I think, that's where you have, where the people are, right? I mean, what we saw after COVID too, when some of the cities shut down, like Washington, D.C., and sort of a variety of other cities, it was the donut effect of, the businesses left the cities because the people were not in the cities and they weren't working in the cities. So there were all the new business creation was occurring out of the cities. I go to New York City quite a bit. I go up there to do media, meet with our members, meet with my family members. My daughter, is in New York. And I am just amazed that I always go to all these business owners, these restaurants, and I just tell them, I'm like, I don't know how you do business in this city. You know what I mean? It's just, it's not only the state regulation. When you go to a New York City and the city regulation, it is just extraordinary. So, yeah, I mean, so business owners, small business owners are heroes, and particularly in some states and in some localities and cities. But I still just don't understand why some governors or state officials don't get this when they see businesses and people moving.
Right.
But then they say, well, in order to close our gap, we're going to tax the businesses more, or we're going to do this new regulation. It's like, what? What are you thinking? Well, the states that have no tax, like zero corporate tax, individual taxes, low regulation, they are doing even more to make themselves more competitive. So, and that's where you see the investments going. That's where you see the big corporate headquarters moving.
Yeah.
That's where you see the small businesses going, and a lot of the people and the innovation and of course, the human capital, yeah,
Mhm.
is moving to those areas as well.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick little break here to tell you about something I have been loving lately. It is Timeline's gummies. So yummy. Now, most of us want more energy. We want better recovery, and you may not know it, but what you're actually asking for is for your cells to actually keep up with you. And that's where Timeline comes in. It is this delicious gummy supplement. Seriously, it tastes like candy, but it is some real science backed work inside your body going on. Timeline helps your body produce urolithin A, which is basically like hitting the refresh button on your cell's power plants. Your mitochondria. I'm sure you've heard that word dropped a time or two before in this podcast. Stronger mitochondria means better energy, better endurance, and healthier aging. So I like that it doesn't feel like a chore to take. It's tasty, it's quick, and I literally never forget to take it because I look forward to it every day. So if you have been thinking about how to better support your energy, your long-term health, and you want to do it in a simple, effective way, then I think Timeline is a great place to start. So you can check them out, and your cells are going to thank you for that when you go to timeline.com/Miesha, Miesha, timeline.com/Miesha. I have a friend of mine, her name's Tina, and she has a small business, or she classifies it as a micro business, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
really, really tiny. She's got like 3 employees, but it's called Workshop, WERK, and she makes beautiful leggings and sports tops. And I wear her stuff all the time because I'm usually, in a comfort mode. But anyways, she is just struggling, like on that verge of not being a business anymore. And she's been struggling since the beginning of it. And she doesn't have the funds to pay influencers. She doesn't have the funds for massive marketing. She's just so tiny. She's female owned. She lives in California, and
Oh.
she's just really struggling. I mean, is there any advice for a smaller than small business and or small businesses that can help in especially this uncertain time where there seems like a turn down in the economy? What can they do? What's some low hanging fruit or even mid hanging fruit that might turn around, small business that's maybe, looking at going under?
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I hope she sticks with it because sometimes, you hit rock bottom and then that's when the next day, that's when, the magic may happen. So, I think for a lot of small businesses, and I'm not quite sure of her case, but, it's really understanding who your market is and your market and, your niche market. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I think who are you selling to and why? What is the why? What is the solution? What is the differentiation, that you provide in terms of your product or service in the marketplace? So I think, understanding, sort of who your consumer, who you're trying to reach, and are you reaching that consumer? I don't know how much, she has, uh, you know, done even any like focus groups, you know what I mean, with who she thinks her consumers are, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it could be young women, it could be friends, it could be family, it could be she could just pull together people just to ask them about her product and just learn from them, in terms of what they like, what they don't like. If they do like it, how can she brand or market, herself better, in that regard? And I'm not, depending, does she use a lot of digital tools or is she really trying to lean into, the digital and social media, social commerce, all that?
What I see, yes, I think she does. But I just think she's so limited in resources. And so this would bring me to another question about small business and investors. Do you help small businesses find the funding that they need to reach a level of sustainability? Because I think sometimes when you're starting from ground zero, I mean, how do you? I think all business, every successful business that I've probably known, needs a certain level of capital at some point to really kind of get over that hump. Otherwise, you're still on an incline all the time and you're just not really reaching that moving summit. So, what about that aspect?
Right. And and I would encourage your friend to she could go to our website, sbecouncil.org, and sign up for our Small Business Insider newsletter for free because every week we have all these great tips and trends and success stories and what other people are doing. And it may be helpful, you know what I mean,
Okay.
to sort of, we really try to, cull, uh, all the great information out there and come up with some of the best tips and trends, for business owners and members. On the access to capital side, I mean, the answer is no. We don't directly provide capital. We don't, point individuals to investors. I mean, but we do, first of all, we acknowledge access to capital is a problem. I mean, it's been one of our core issues in terms of policies that are going to encourage more capital formation and access to capital. For example, that's why, we sort of led the whole investment crowdfunding effort, and that's been transformational for many businesses in terms of democratizing access to capital. Right now, we're working on a whole number of things in Washington, D.C. to improve capital access for startups, for growth-oriented businesses, for micro businesses, um, to improve the SBA loan program, portfolio. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard. And so what we do is work on a lot of the policies that are going to really lower the cost of capital, increase the abundance of capital, and come up with more resources of capital for small businesses. And there's still a lot to be done in that regard. But, we are hopeful, in this administration that, I mean, there's a lot of initiatives that are, and things going through the Congress right now that are going to be helpful for businesses of all sizes and various stages that they might be in.
Like what?
Well, here's a really exciting one. Okay, so the Trump administration, a couple of weeks ago, they put out a new executive order on allowing or clarifying the rules around 401k funds, that these can be invested in private markets, in real estate, and in digital assets, right? I mean, right now, when you look at a vanilla 401k plan, it's mostly, the public markets, it's in the big companies. All the rich people have made their money getting that to a public company. And what this would do, and there would be regulations around this, is that it would open up trillions of dollars of capital that are in 401k funds to private investments, to small businesses, to pull. I mean, this is a lot of money, that's locked up. And there's a limited selection in terms of what these investors can invest in, right? I mean, the public companies, it's like whatever. So that is really exciting. So that was, and if anyone wants to learn more about this, SBEcouncil.org. I did a big op-ed on it. We are filing comments on it. We're getting our members very involved in making this a reality. But there's a lot of locked up capital right now, Miesha, that is locked up because of outdated rules and regulations or because of legal risks. And I know who's going to oppose this, just like who opposed the debt and equity crowdfunding piece, is all the rich investors, because they're like, no, this is our space. I mean, this is where we want to make all the money. Before, and then when it goes public, you guys can, get the 1 to 2% returns or 3 or 5% returns, but we want the 150, 200% returns. You know what I mean, on these businesses. So that is just one example, of different initiatives that we're working on that will make capital abundant for more businesses and really do some innovative things in the marketplace.
So if we unlock some of those funds, if you're successful in that and it's going to help small business, like how do those funds directly help a small business? What's the trickle down effect?
Well, it's going to be basically, as far as I know, the reading of the rules. Now we're going to have to, now this is sort of in concept, right?
Yep.
And then after that, there's going to be, the Department of Labor will provide some guidance or write some rules. The SEC and the Treasury Department will weigh in. I mean, there'll be funds where it could be a fund that says, hey, we're a fund that directly supports entrepreneurs and small businesses. Or the way that I read the executive order, you can directly invest in a small business. So the problem right now is there's a lot of legal risk involved. And there'll be education with this. There'll be protections for investors, just like there is with a debt and equity-based crowdfunding. But there'll be more direct access, to a knowledge of the business. Now, the businesses themselves will have to say, hey, we're looking for money, right? And I think there's going to be different groups and pools and networks that develop out of this. There'll be some adoption time in the marketplace until this develops. But there'll be sort of, there'll be a framework, and then there'll be a market, that evolves where there'll be that direct access, to those investment dollars. So it's to determine how this all develops, because we got to get the rules,
Right.
out of the DOL first. And they can't be too regulatory or crazy or complex, or that's not going to benefit small businesses. So that process in itself, is going to be interesting, for us to be engaged in.
Yeah, very good. Well, I mean, more money is never a bad thing if it's going in the right place, let's just say.
That's right. That's it. So that's it. It's like, but still, I mean, you have vested interests in maintaining the current
Yes.
system,
Oh, there's going to be a
right?
lot of people that don't like you, Karen.
I know. I've done this for 30 years. I'm used to it.
Yeah, you must have really thick skin. But I mean, these are probably like important, influential people. I mean, how does that work? How does this affect your life? I'm curious about you a little bit because I mean, taking on a position like this, I mean, what in the world really inspired you? Obviously, you said, I know at the beginning of this, that you like it. It is fulfilling to you. I think that you enjoy seeing, the small businesses and you enjoy seeing the American dream and whatnot. But what was the turning point for you, 30 years ago when you said, "You know what? This is what I want to do." Like why did that call to you? Before you ever knew that it was going to be rewarding and that you were going to love it and you're going to make a career out of it.
I just think, the whole issue of fairness and access to the American dream and success. And, there's always barriers to, there are barriers. There are people who can overcome barriers, right? I mean, there's the 5%, but then there's the other, that, oh, I'm going to break through this barrier. But then there were so many barriers, in place that didn't mean to be there, that are, there for, stupid reasons. They've been around since 1920, and, that's the way it's always been. Or there's vested interests, people who make
Hmm.
a lot of money in the system the way that it is. But, at the end of the day, and I've been through a lot of these battles, whether it's health insurance and the health insurance companies not liking me when we led the coalition to make health savings accounts available, and now we're trying to even blow them out. And with, President Trump and the whole MAHA movement and what they're trying to do with HSAs, um, HSAs didn't exist, and it's because
What's
the
an
health insurance,
HSA?
a health savings account,
Health
basically,
savings
where
account.
yeah, where you have a
Okay.
health savings account paired with a high deductible health insurance policy, where essentially, you're putting money into the account tax-free with withdrawing it tax-free to pay for out-of-pocket expenses, right?
Oh, okay, so you
Now,
kind of become your own, a little bit of
it,
your own
it,
medical insurance, essentially. You pay your
it
own money into your own account and you can pay. Yeah, I love this idea. I didn't know this
s-
existed.
so they've been around for quite a long time. But we're improving them. We're like
Okay.
saying, hey, look at why can't you use the HSA to pay for your monthly health insurance premiums for your high deductible policy? This doesn't make sense. Or why are we limited on the amount of money that we could put in our HSA because we could build, for our long-term healthcare needs? Or why can't we use that HSA to pay for um, health and wellness stuff, to pay for a gym membership? Things that are going to
Yes.
make America more, and that's part of our whole MAHA agenda that we can talk
Right. This
about a
is
little
more
bit too.
preventative. If you can start paying
Is
for a gym membership, you could
a
start.
gym member, yes, and other
Yes.
type of preventative over the counter. And we've over years we've increased the amount of over the counter stuff that you can buy with your health savings account. And now because of the big beautiful bill, you can use your health savings account to pay for direct primary care at the local level, which is another significant improvement. But we need to keep making improvements to HSAs. But that was a battle where the health insurance companies they
I
have a
didn't want
lock. You
that.
know what I
They don't
mean?
want
On
that.
they didn't want that 20 years ago, or wherever, and they were just. But I'm like, but there's been other policies like, look at there is the pie keeps growing. Everyone benefits. Why can't we have innovation in the industry? And of course, now the health insurance companies, they sell HSAs just like everyone else. You know what I mean? It's like, so of course they got their piece as well. But that is just, another example. And there's been, several, other regulatory, examples over the years in the energy industry. Um, and I'm sure with under MAHA and some of the things that we're supporting there, um, given the interests that uh, but it's Washington. A person's your enemy one day, and they call you up the next, 2 months later, and they, oh, Karen, can you support this? And I have to say that that's sort of the brand, I think, or personality or mindset that I bring to my work is like, you're not my enemy. You know what I mean? This is what is the right thing to do. I'm doing it
Yeah.
for market competition. I'm doing it to bring down costs for healthcare costs for small
Oh
businesses
my
because
gosh.
that's
Yes.
been like one of our top issues for 30 years. And, it's like, but this is the right thing to do to make the marketplace more price sensitive, and for people to have access to money that they can use for out-of-pocket costs. And,
What
you know,
about what about medications? Like they're so expensive here.
they
I mean, I
are,
have a friend of mine who's a type 1 diabetic. He would die without insulin. This is not a lifestyle choice. This isn't
I
anything that's
know.
and it's so expensive. Even for him to have a glucose monitor or have those are so expensive. Like what? Like why is it so expensive here? Because I feel like sometimes certain medications and things that are needed for people don't cost that much in other countries. They're manufactured the same way, the same people. Like, why is it so expensive?
Well, there's a couple reasons. I mean, yeah, there are many drugs, in other countries, and they may not be manufactured. I mean, they're US based companies, but there's price controls in those countries, right? Where they do have price controls. We're funding most of the innovation here in the US, right? It takes hundreds of billions of dollars, like
We,
$10 billion.
like the taxpayers, you mean?
No, no, like
Or
like
like who?
the private sector, right? The private sector investors, the drug
Okay.
companies, basically, and by extension, us who use the drugs. I mean, that's how they make their profits, right? So we're
Right.
sort of we're
Right.
the investors. You know, that's where the resources come from, and so there is this skewed marketplace globally where it takes 10 to 12 years to bring a drug to market. It costs billions and billions and billions of dollars. Then and then we you've got you got to make up for that money, and so you're charging these prices, but then the prices are basically capped throughout much of the other world, right? You have price controls in some of these countries,
We don't
so
have that
you're not
here.
no, you're not able to. Well, they're starting it, as you know, under the most favored nation policy that President Trump is pushing. He would match the prices of of these other countries, the most favored nation, and say we have to charge those prices here in the U.S. that are low price in those other countries. And we're like, well, wait a minute. We get why the president may be doing this, but the problem is that then that has a downstream effect on innovation, investment. The biopharmaceutical industry, yeah, there's a lot of big businesses, but 70% of the businesses have fewer than 100 employees. 60% have fewer than 50. So this truly is the innovators in the industry are small biopharma companies who are basically, taking risks, getting lots of money from investors. And if they can't recoup that profit, then there's going to be less investment, less innovation, and less life-saving drugs that come to market. So it's a skewed global market. And I think the president needs to do what he's doing, working with the EU and saying, well, why are you going after our big tech companies? Why are you fining them? Why are you putting regulation? Why are you like using them as cash cows to fund your government? This is sort of a discriminatory trade practice. And I think, price controls on drugs and other, types of regulations in other countries on US products are also it's trade policies. And we got to start putting pressure on them to say, look, at the US is not going to fund innovation throughout the world. We're not going to be able to do this. So that's a very complicated issue, but there's other reasons. I mean, you have middlemen in pharmacy, uh, PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, who are middlemen in the whole system that also drive the price higher. We're trying to get some reforms done there to increase transparency and lower costs that way. I mean, generics and biosimilars can be brought to market sooner. Um, the speed at which we bring drugs to markets can be quicker, a little quicker, but not too quick, to sort of bring down the cost. So, but you're right, it is expensive. It is. And I feel for your friend, that has to spend these. And it's weird. I mean, sometimes you can go right with the prescription. You're like, wait, that cost me $1? And then meanwhile, someone else is paying thousands of dollars, right? A month. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, it just doesn't
Yeah.
seem to make sense.
Yeah, even in my experience, I have hypothyroidism, and a lot of times I choose not to take the medication because I feel like I can, somewhat manage it through diet and lifestyle. I can certainly make it better, and I can certainly make it worse. Um, but sometimes, especially if I'm going in a training camp and I'm like, I gotta make sure my weight is gonna come down. I need to make sure I'm taking the medication. And I have seen it just skyrocket. I think I take Armor Thyroid, and it used to be like $30 and now it's like 80 or 90, for the same amount. It's
Hmm.
just insanity to me how expensive these things are getting.
Everything is, but I hear that on
Everything.
everything, isn't it? I
Everything.
mean, I'm just like everyone. I go to this store. I'm like, wait,
Everything.
when did this happen? I mean, when did this chicken, go up like
Yeah.
300%, or just, yeah. So
Why
I
is that in
think,
general? Like, why are we dealing with like this crazy, inflation? You know, why do we have to go through all of that? Like, what's going on with the economy in general?
well, again, I think it's just, I think it's sort of resetting right now. I don't think the economy had ever recovered from the supply chain glitches, right, of the COVID era. And so, really the mindset for a lot of the large businesses of those is like, very much keeping inventory low and I mean, just a very careful, not investing a lot of money, not being robust or confident. You had the high inflation. The Biden years, whether it was consumers or businesses, really did not have a lot of confidence in the economy. So they're not going to be doing the investing and the building out and the building inventories and of all those other things that are going to help heal the supply chains. So I still think that we're dealing with some of those issues and some of the inflationary pressures. Um, I am hopeful that, I mean, you've seen it ease, but we haven't seen the price drops, right? Except for maybe gas, right? Except for California, sorry. Except for California. um,
Yeah, the gas
but
is still just expensive there.
I know, I know. I don't think, yeah, sorry about that. California, maybe New York too. But um, yeah, so there is still some resetting. And I think we've got another year or so of trying to figure this out because we're trying to onshore a lot of manufacturing. There's a lot going on in the labor market now, where people are moving, we're pushing people out of the US, that um, in certain industries who were labor market participants. One of the top issues of our small business members is access to skilled labor and human capital. So, you can't take advantage of growth opportunities or build your business if you don't have the people. I mean, there's not an AI tool for everything, right? I mean, there is for a lot,
Yeah.
but not where those capital intensive industries. So there is still some stability and some glitches that need to be worked out in the economy. But hopefully that will happen because we're going to hit stagflation, right? High
Right.
prices, no growth, and that would be horrible for the U.S. economy.
Yeah. There's two questions I want to ask you pertaining to that. Because you said AI, and I think that there have been some great things that have probably
Hmm.
equalized and helped small business. I know you were mentioning that earlier, that some of those kind of roadblocks or barriers to maybe starting a business. And you were saying how many people have applied for business license and it's really going through the roof. I have to also wonder if part of that reason is because people are like, well, if I'm going to be broke anyways, I might as well work for myself. I feel like I mean, honestly, then work for someone else, or they're struggling to find a job, which, again, when you get in these spots of hardship, sometimes it can inspire your next best move. So that's not always a bad thing, and perhaps a little bit that's what we're seeing. But my question here is, do you see AI having a negative impact in the workforce availability, for humans to come in and do the jobs that they used to be able to do? For example, Chat GPT. I don't have it yet, but everyone I know has it. And I'm like a little hesitant about it because I'm like, gosh, do I really need it? Because I feel like I'll just lean on it too much. But for example, I know that Chat GPT can like take a legal document
Hmm.
and really, tell you, like, simplify it and basically be sort of that legal person that you would turn to and say, hey, can you tell me what the heck this garble means? Like, you don't need to hire, somebody to tell you that now. It's available through AI. Okay, so now our, attorneys, lawyers, people. lawyers in general, like seeing less work, less money come into them because of AI, and vice versa. That trickle down to small business where it's like, okay, we used to need 5 people to do this. Now we only need 2. That's great. But now we're out 3 jobs. People who want jobs. Is this affecting the workforce? Is what I feel like is what I see my sister struggling with when she's trying to get a job for months on end. I'm like, it
Hmm.
can't be that hard. But you know what? I think it is. I'm just so out of that loop. I haven't had to have a 9 to 5. I've been very blessed in my career to be able to do what I love and be financially stable. But now I think if I were a young person coming into the workforce and trying to find that work, it's seemingly more challenging. Do you think AI has had an impact on that?
I do. I do. I don't think it's as acute though. Um, I think it's more of an economic uncertainty right now as opposed to like the impact of AI. Now, when we poll small business owners, we've been polling them for 2 years on their use of AI. Our latest survey came out 73% saying they're active users of AI. Like 85% said they're going to continue their investments, significant investments in AI. And when we ask them what's the biggest benefit, it's like, well, it puts us at a competitive advantage, helps us cut costs, but it allows them to level up their business and allows them to allow their employees to focus on higher value work. That's going to grow the business and that's going to build the business and it's going to strengthen the business. So they weren't getting rid of employees because of AI. Now, but then again, the other here's the other piece, as I mentioned before, is small business owners. One of their other biggest challenges was access to skilled workers, access to workers.
Right.
So I think AI, in some respects, is replacing the need for some workers, right? It's like, oh, I wanted a marketing person, but now I have all these great tools for AI. It can spit out images, content. It could do my automated email marketing. I have CRM tools. I have this. I have that. It can control all my social media. Um, and and then I have this other person who can look at everything to make sure it's okay. And that's what we tell business owners is that whatever you do with AI, you still need that human look.
Human eye.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes,
So
because
true.
you don't want to be if, for example, you're using it to write content or you're doing an image, you don't want to violate a copyright or you know what I mean? There's
Oh,
there's
yeah.
there's intellectual property
Well, and
issues you have to
AI
look
doesn't
at.
always make sense. I've had some social media things where, I'm looking at something and I'm like, this was definitely created by AI because the ending doesn't make sense. It doesn't go with the beginning. It misses
Yes,
that human flair, that human
yeah,
touch.
it's an AI driven, content piece. So, but I would say, I mean, when depending, definitely the big companies are saying, scour everything we do and where can AI, replace the workers? You know what I mean? Or where can we use AI to improve efficiencies, which means basically less opportunities for workers. And so we're seeing that, in the data. So some of the more traditional places that, uh, people getting out of school or looking for jobs, it's just the opportunities just aren't as abundant, in that regard. So I think there is a disruptive period because again, with AI being widely adopted, I think particularly by larger companies and by some of the bigger that's having an impact on employment. But there's going to be opportunities as well. There is just no doubt that that and with quantum computing, there's just going to be new industries that we don't even can't even imagine right now, or new opportunities. And so I feel bad for your sister, but it may be that, gee, it may be self-employment, right? Because we know that you're right. A lot of people start businesses, and next thing you know, they're like out of necessity, not out of opportunity, because necessity entrepreneurship and opportunity entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But a lot of necessity entrepreneurship turns into amazing things in terms of, just doing side gigs, or you see opportunities or holes in the marketplace or opportunities to start businesses. There are a lot of small businesses that need a lot of help with AI. They still need marketing help, that need to know how to use AI. So yes, but it is being disruptive. but I don't think it's, I know small to mid-sized businesses, they aren't shedding jobs because of AI. It's allowing them to level up, and it's replacing people they can't find or,
Yeah.
that, yeah, that weren't available in the marketplace.
Okay.
But I do think, but Misha, I do think though that when I look at the jobs numbers and the jobs data, and I know some of it might be wrong, we're still trying to figure out the BLS, is BS, in terms of the job numbers that it produces. I think there is a disruptive effect going on, with a lot of the larger businesses.
Right.
And yes, there, in my mind, there's no doubt about that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm scared to death when it comes to AI and because it's not I don't see an end in sight, and eventually I feel like if we keep progressing in this way, I am not as optimistic as you are, but it's a breath of fresh air to hear, like you say there's a disruptive period and there's hope and it will spark these different things. Usually pretty optimistic, but I'm really afraid that eventually it will lead to, AI doing most of these things. And then I don't know what that means for people. So I guess that's where I'm just like, I don't like, what does that mean for humans? Like if we don't have those jobs, but again, maybe that's what we really need is the opportunity to reconnect with selves, to not be slaves to a work that we don't want to do. Maybe this will provide an opportunity, maybe, to do more of what we love, and maybe that's really what this could boil down to.
And I listened to the doom and gloomers, and I listened to the crazy optimists. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
said there's always, and over the years, 30 years of disruptive technology, it's sort of landed in the middle somewhere. Again, the same thing was said about the internet and e-commerce, and that small businesses wouldn't exist. I think at the end of the day, and this is part of the whole health and wellness thing, is that people like the human touch. They like going to stores. They like going to, you know what I mean? There's that community element,
Yeah.
of in-person stuff, to the farmers markets, to retail, to the main streets, to the restaurants, that, and, AI, can't replace that. Again, it's just, how are we using AI judiciously and smartly in our businesses? And businesses, small businesses are, in order to compete, because they have no choice. They got to bring down costs, right? They can't compete with the big guys, and this is being very helpful for them. But I do think it will land somewhere, in the middle. And I don't think, in my view, it'll control our lives, because then there's going to be the next wave of something else that comes along. Um, but we're just telling businesses to be careful with their use of AI, given there could be legal
Yeah.
risks, and there's also risk to customers as well. You know what I mean? That's why they buy from a small business. They want the human touch. They want you
Yeah.
use it, to sort
Absolutely.
of, yeah, yeah.
Okay, what about so the other part to this question was going to be about cryptocurrency and kind of the potential degradation of the US dollar. You have any thoughts on that?
Um, I am not as a doom and gloomer, but I don't want to go there, because that's not really my policy space. I'm
Okay.
still sort of exploring, that whole area myself. And
Same. I don't get it totally.
when I come back in 6 months or a year, and I'll have my views on that for sure.
All right, well, I'll have you on again then for sure.
Yes.
This has been so enlightening and I'm definitely inspired. I consider myself an entrepreneur
You
myself.
are.
Thank you. As I'm doing this podcast and I'm trying to spread growth and, choosing yourself, choosing to grow, not being passive, not just accepting change, but actually advocating for yourself and deciding what it is that you want. What do you want out of life? So, I sit here and I have this, wonderful conversation with you, and I feel incredibly inspired. And I'm so grateful that there are people like you out there advocating for that American dream and not just letting it die. Because I know that it's hard, but I think the hard times can really inspire the best out of us. It can bring the fight out of anybody who cares about, what we're going through and what we have to gain and what we refuse to lose. So, I think my final question to you then is, in this coming year in 2026, is it a good time? Is it a good idea to start your own small business?
Yes. I think it's always a good time. I mean, there's never been more access, I think, to the whole plate of digital tools and digital access to customers and consumers. I mean, it's just, And when you look at the cost a long time ago, at what it costs to start a business and to do mail campaigns and, just, I mean, there is a digital tool, there's an AI tool, there's a market, for what you do if you're trying to solve a problem in the marketplace and, and you have the conviction, right? To move forward. So I think it's a great time. It's always a great time to start a business during a disruptive period. And and again, I mean, history has borne that out in terms of the biggest brands, in the U.S. who started during recessions and great recessions, and even small businesses starting during those times. So yes, it is a good time. The policy environment is getting there with good tax policy, regulatory policy. I think they'll be cutting interest rates, and there's great access to resources online. And then please, people can sign up again. Small Business Insider at our on our website sbecouncil.org for free. We'll give you all the latest information and resources that you need, or just send us an email and we'll set if you're looking for resources, we'll find you the resources that you need to launch and grow a successful business. But congratulations to you, Miesha, for doing this and for being an entrepreneur. And talking to you is incredibly inspiring to me, and that's why what I do, what I do,
It's
why I do what I do. Yes.
so good. Thank you so much, Karen, for your time today and for your expertise and your insights and your inspiration. It was wonderful to have you on, and I cannot wait to share this with the audience.
Thank you.
Thanks.